I am Bruce Apar, and you are watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog is brought to you by Chase Media Group, publisher of The Penny Saver, and also provider of multimedia marketing solutions for an omni-channel marketplace. And what that means is that anything that involves media and marketing, especially as it pertains to local businesses, Chase Media Group does it. Email and direct mail and websites, and you name it, commercial printing. We're one of the largest printers. And so we just would like to let you know about that at the head of the show. And we always thank our CEO, Carla Chase, and our Chief Strategy Officer, Frank J. Rich, for producing the show. And you can go on YouTube and search for Townlink TV, and all the other Frank Talks with Bruce the blogs will be there for you to enjoy and to watch any parts of that you would like to. And I don't know, some of you who watch the show on a regular basis, and very often, in fact, typically, we have guests on the show. The last couple of shows, meaning the previous one, which was called Selfie, and this one, if we don't have a guest, or if I just have a lot of things I want to talk about on behalf of our producer, Chase Media Group, about life in Westchester and interesting people and events and ideas and subjects that we think you'd like to hear about, then here I am, solo, or as they say in theater, up in one. You know, up in one means if somebody's standing on the stage, center stage, and they're like, upstage is going backstage, actually, going in reverse, let's say. And if you're alone on stage, they call that up in one. So I'm sort of doing that. And if you have seen the show, how about this snazzy new set we have, which I'm very happy about. I want to thank our director, Richard Redmond, for his resourcefulness in coming up with this look, which I'm really enjoying, by the way. And I hope you do too. But by the way, this is not Bishop Fulton J. Sheen, although it may look a little bit like that. I'm not going to be evangelical, even though it may look that way. So the topic today, so to speak, there's a lot of topics actually, but the omnibus theme, which we're going to carry forward, by the way, not only on this show, but on other shows as well, is Westchester XYZ. What does that mean? I can't even say it. Westchester XYZ. Well, for one thing, remember, I'm sure you do remember, the musical Annie, the Broadway musical Annie, which, by the way, on any given weekend is playing probably at some high school or middle school in the country. It's extremely popular, especially in school venues. There's a big song, NYC, NYC. And I sort of think of Westchester XYZ with that music playing through my head, Westchester XYZ. And so what it means, at least to me, and now I'm transferring it to everybody watching, is Westchester XYZ really is whatever you want it to be. So it's sort of like a substitute for the alphabet. It's like Westchester from A to Z. And as we go through the show, you'll understand what we're talking about, or at least I hope you do. And I just want to make a comment because it's hard not to mention this. It's in the news so much. Is is that Metro North accident, that horrific Metro North accident, which they said is the worst in the commuter rail's history, that commuter rail's history. And it just seems what happens is when you're living in a place like this, there's the so-called 6 degrees of separation, and you talk to somebody who knew maybe somebody was on the train who, thank God, was okay, or very tragically knew somebody who perished because of that train accident. And so we just want to send our thoughts and prayers and condolences to anybody who was touched by that accident. As time goes on, they'll investigate and see if there's anything that can be done in the future to further minimize things like that happening. But it really has shaken this whole region, actually. Certainly Westchester County. It's really shaken a lot of people, and immediately people who take Metro North were actually changing where they may sit on the train based on what they heard about the accident and how where you were sitting may have affected you and may have caused great bodily damage, which we won't get into right now. So we just wanted to acknowledge that, since it is something that in some way affects all of us, whether or not we take Metro North. And what else is going on is I want to step back actually a long time ago to 1964. We're hearing a lot about politics, national politics, presidential politics these days. Who's going to be the Republican nominee? And a lot of people seem to think they know who's going to be the Democratic nominee, which would be somebody who actually is a Westchester resident in Chappaqua, and that would be Hillary Clinton and the former Secretary of State. And in 1964, when I was growing up, I was a convention junkie for whatever reason. I would sort of imitate Walter Cronkite and remember Huntley Brinkley, those of you who are maybe not far from my age. Huntley Brinkley were the NBC commentators, and Walter Cronkite was CBS. And they were always at the convention in their glass booth above the floor of the convention. And I would actually be at home with I think it was a Webcore reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I'd have headphones on, like I'm announcing the convention. And that was like my idea of a kid having fun at the time. It's fantasizing. But what I'll never forget, and what anybody who was watching at the time or following politics will never forget, is at the 1964 Democratic Convention, Robert Kennedy was a keynoter. His brother, John F. Kennedy, had been assassinated the previous November. So we're talking about, whatever it might be, 8 or 9 months after the Kennedy assassination, which, understatement to say, shook this country to its core, and in some ways, reverberations from it are still being felt today. So Robert F. Kennedy was going to speak. However, before he spoke, there was a film of the late President Kennedy that was shown to the convention delegates on the floor. And it was very well crafted, very poignant. Needless to say, it was an extremely emotional time, especially at the Democratic Convention. And the end of the film was President Kennedy, I believe like he was getting off an airplane, if my recollection is clear, and John, who later in life, unfortunately, also was killed in an airplane crash, an airplane he was piloting. But he was John as a little kid. And he'd be running up in the film, the finale, to President Kennedy, and President Kennedy was bending down. And the fact that he didn't pick up John was poignant in itself, because he had such severe back problems, did President Kennedy, that he couldn't even pick up his son, who maybe weighed, 30 pounds, whatever he would have weighed at the time. And it ended with that image, and the soundtrack was from the 1960 Broadway musical Camelot, that was written by Lerner and Loewe, who previously had written still one of the most famous and most successful musicals of all, My Fair Lady. So this Camelot was the follow-up to that. And it was because the music was there underneath the visual, because President Kennedy loved to listen to the Camelot Broadway cast album. And so this, if you want to call it, perfect storm of emotions was coming together. Camelot's playing, and the key lyrics were, "Don't let it be forgot that once there was a spot for one brief shining moment that was known as Camelot." And the analogy to the Kennedy administration and the Kennedy family and the whole country, and the feeling at that time that we were in a period of renewal and optimism was just uncanny. It's almost like the musical could have been written about the Kennedy era, and ever since then they become inseparable. Camelot is immediately synonymous with the Kennedy era, and after that film, this is how effective the film was, is when Robert Kennedy got up to speak, the convention delegates, in a total outburst of emotion, just did not stop their ovation and wouldn't let him speak, basically, after seeing that film and the lead into it. So why am I going on and on about this? Because I just saw last night Camelot. That's why, at the Westchester Broadway Theater. And I'm happy to say I go to as many of the shows there as I can as a member of the press, and I review them. And you can read reviews, by the way, in the Penny Saver. And I have to say, and I wasn't the only one who walked out of the theater feeling this way, it's one of the best shows that the Westchester Broadway Theater has put on. And that's saying quite a lot. I haven't been around this whole time, but this is their 41st year. And I've seen shows for the last few years. So now what you're seeing is me with the great, extremely talented actress, Jennifer Hope Wills, who plays Guinevere. And boy, she is on fire in this show. Her performance is just one of the best female lead performances I've seen at the Westchester Broadway Theater. And it's no accident. Jennifer Hope Wills, who you just saw with me, has been on Broadway. She was in Phantom of the Opera for 4 years as Christine. So she obviously is extremely accomplished. A beautiful voice. The original Camelot, Guinevere, was played by none other than Julie Andrews, who of course was in My Fair Lady as Eliza Doolittle. And when I think back on who played King Arthur now, it's just a funny thing to think about. Richard Burton, one of the great actors of any time, of any era, one of the great actors of the 20th century, Richard Burton, was King Arthur. And Robert Goulet was Sir Lancelot, and the signature song from Camelot, If Ever I Would Leave You, that Robert Goulet sang, became his trademark. I mean, that show basically made his whole career. And he had a just inimitable voice, did Robert Goulet. And I would encourage you, if you like going to shows and Broadway shows, to really take in Camelot at the Westchester Broadway Theater. It's playing through April 5, and it's a dinner theater, so if you've never been there, you get a great meal. It's an extremely enjoyable experience. And I also always like to acknowledge my good friend Pia Haas, who is a director. I've been in her shows, not at the Westchester Broadway Theater, but at the Armonk Players in Armonk. And Pia does a great job at the Westchester Broadway Theater as the public relations person. So I just wanted to bring that up, that especially if you remember the Kennedy era in this country essentially from 1960 to 63 while he was president. you really should go see Camelot. And it becomes, by the way, very emotional at the end, again, because you cannot separate that show and those lyrics I was mentioning from the historic events that took place in those years, and especially on November 22, 1963. So that's the Broadway minute, or maybe it's about Broadway 10 minutes on this show. And as you may know from watching the show, I love theater. I love to perform myself. Not so much, not musicals necessarily, but other types of theater. And speaking of theater, speaking of leading ladies, there's different types of leading ladies. In the column that I write that appears each week in the Penny Saver, in the February 11th issue, my Bruce the Block column is headlined Leading Ladies, but it's not about the theater, and it's not about movies or anything like that. In this case, the leading ladies are business women who are very accomplished, and in some cases who are trying to refine their skills and move ahead like anybody in their career wants to do, who is ambitious. And the Manhattanville College, which is in Purchase, they do great work over at Manhattanville, and I've gotten to know some of the people there from going to their recent events. They have panel discussions that are very informative, very topical, and what they announced at the end of January, and I was privileged to attend this event, is the Women's Leadership Institute, and that's part of the Manhattanville School of Business, which is a graduate school. Now, this is not, I'm fairly certain it's not a degree program. It really is meant for its mid-career, basically mid-career and up people. There is a certificate program that's part of the Women's Leadership Institute, and that's going to, I believe, go on for 5 months. It's called Lead with Distinction. And so they had a launch event at Manhattanville College in this historic, magnificent structure from the late 19th century. It was built, called Reed Castle, R-E-I-D Castle. I mean, if you ever have the opportunity, you should just go to see this building, which they don't make them like that anymore, that's for sure. It really is a historic landmark. And it was great because we did speed networking at the beginning of the event, and I got to meet a lot of people. There were about 200 people there. There were not more than 20 of my gender. So there were like 180 women, and maybe at the most 20 men. And as I say in my column, we were humbled to be amongst them, and that really is true. I mean, I felt like I was really happy to be there, and I thank Co-Communications, a PR firm that works throughout Westchester and the region, happens to be based in Mount Kisco, and my friend Stacy Cohen, that asked me to come in to write about it and talk about it like I am now and cover it. And all credit for the establishment of the Women's Leadership Institute at Manhattanville College goes to the dean, Dr. Anthony Davidson, who has been working on this for a number of years, according to the president of Manhattanville, John Strauss, who said that at the event. It's Dean Davidson's brainchild. The director of the Institute is Kathy Meany, who spoke, and what she was saying is that they're going to focus for mid-level professionals and managers, females only in this case, as far as I know, on financial acumen and communicating and negotiating, productivity, strategic thinking. And, you know, think about it. If you follow the news at all these days, there's a lot of focus and a lot of news being made by CEOs who happen to be female. Sheryl Sandberg of Facebook, of course, has the bestseller Lean In, and Marissa Mayer of Yahoo came from Google, and I believe Sheryl Sandberg came from Google as well. Now, Marissa Mayer, who is not yet 40 years old, first she was at Google, then now she's at Yahoo, running Yahoo. She is a billionaire. who I think she's maybe 37 or is not yet 40, let's just say that. And so they've become really representative of how females of their caliber and their experience and their smarts run major global powerhouse companies now. That's the way it is, and it should be that way, quite frankly. So the timing of the Women's Leadership Institute is really opportune when we have that going on in the business world, throughout the world for that matter. My boss, Carla Chase, is CEO of our company, so that's another example very close to home. And if you look also close to home in the Hudson Valley, in lower Hudson Valley, PepsiCo and IBM, they are both run by females. And that was pointed out, by the way, at this event by Marcia Gordon, who is the CEO of the Business Council of Westchester. So again, Marcia runs that organization, which is a very influential organization. And for that matter, the Westchester County Association is also headed by Marissa Brett. Now, I mean, this is not, it actually trivializes it to say this is a trend. It's not a trend. It's a natural evolution, and I would agree with anybody, male or female, that would say it's actually way overdue. If you're capable of running a company or running a division in a company, whatever the case is, it doesn't matter what gender you are. It just doesn't. In fact, when I walked into the room at this event, I have to admit, I rehearsed this line. I said, the first person I see, the first woman I see at this event, I'm very happily married, so it wasn't that kind of a line. I was just being my usual smart alecky self. So I went up to this woman, and I believe the woman was, at the time, Hilda Maria Valdespino, who I found out talking to her as an inspirational speaker. And I go up to her, and she asks, I knew I'd get this question, so I was ready with a rehearsed line, a canned response. What are you doing here? And so what do I say? I go, I'm just about the least sexist son of Adam that you'll ever meet. And I got a little laugh out of her, actually. And what did I mean by that? Well, I meant that I really wanted to be at an event that really is a landmark. And Manhattanville College, as it proudly said, is the first college in Westchester at least, to offer any kind of program for women's leadership like this. And so I really wanted to be there and see what it was all about, and be able to talk to you about it and to write about it. And what was really, I think, significant is when Marcia Gordon made the point about that, right close by is PepsiCo and IBM, both run by women. And then as I was writing this, I thought, well, you know something? There's another global corporation that is run by a female, and that's Mary Barra, B-A-R-R-A, of General Motors. And so tying this whole thing together I fully expect we're going to see a lot more CEOs being not men, let's put it that way, being women. And so the head of GM is a woman these days. And remember the line from the mid-20th century about GM? I'll tell you if you don't remember it, I'm going to tell it to you right now. As General Motors goes, so goes the nation. So that's how I end my column, which is to say, I think you're going to see a lot more CEOs who are female. And my parting line for the column is, ladies, lead the way. So more power to you and to us for following your leadership. So I just wanted to mention that. And speaking again of business, our company is all about business. We're a business-to-business marketing services company. Frank J. Rich, who is our Chief Strategy Officer and is an award-winning columnist, he writes his column every week under the banner of ROI, which is return on investment. And I just wanted to give you a little preview that the ROI for next week, well, not next week, for February 11th, which I don't know when you're watching this, and it is called Older and Better. And I really enjoy all his columns, and this one in particular, I could really, get excited about, actually. Get my pulse going, get my heart rate going, And that's Older and Better. And Frank cites some recent surveys that talk about how some of the best workers, and by the way, any of you out there who may be hiring people, please keep this in mind. Some of the best workers today are 55 and over. And the workforce is aging in a very positive way in terms of a lot of things, productivity and experience that comes with the territory when you do hire somebody who's 55 and over. And by the way, anybody else on your staff, regardless of what age they are, but especially if they're on the younger side, are going to benefit from a 55 and older person being amongst them or being a co-worker of them, which is one of the points that Frank makes as well. And this is interesting, that according to a survey by the Nationwide Building Society, that the 55 plus worker, and this is sort of counterintuitive, has fewer sick days, and lower loss of work days from partying. That's not counterintuitive, that makes sense. But also a greater responsibility to goals and achievement on average than younger workers. I mean, now a lot of this is logical when you hear it. You say, well, it does make sense. You become a lot more settled when you're in that age group that I'm talking about. And so there's a lot of advantages to having somebody in the 55 and older bracket working in your company. And I encourage you to read Frank's column, Older and Better. And by the way, if you want to receive his column by email, or mine for that matter, just send a note to info, I-N-F-O, at chasemediagroup.com, and just let us know what email you'd like to be added to our list to get his column or my column or both of our columns. Okay, well, we are just about out of time, and there are a few other things I wanted to talk about, which I could save for next time, not the least of which is a segment we're going to start called APAR Apps, A-P-P-S. And it's not about appetizers, although I love appetizers, especially on Friday night. My wife and I find different places to go Friday night after work and look for good appetizers to eat and happy hours and things like that. And I'll share that with you on future shows too, recommending some places to go to. But for now, if you want to reduce your stress, let's say, I talked last time about one way to reduce your stress is to stop looking at your phone every 2 minutes. However, when you are looking at your phone, there's an app called Calm, C-A-L-M, Calm. Look it up on the iTunes App Store, and you can play different music sounds, background music, the ocean, the wind, the rain, maybe somebody breathing like they're next to you, or that type of stuff. And it really is effective. So that's my APAR app appetizer for this show is Calm, C-A-L-M. And by the way, I'm not obliged to have this disclaimer, but I don't have any stock in it, or I'm not recommending it for that reason. And I do see Richard Redmond going like this, and I don't think that there's an airplane coming in, so it must mean that he wants me to sign off. So thank you for watching Frank Talks with Bruce the Blog. And remember, when Bruce the Blog listens, people talk.